everyone and welcome back to my channel and yet another video in which I plan on showing you a small haul and also what I'm currently reading. Now the book haul is pretty small. I have bought 4 new books to show you over the past couple of months, and some of these books you will have already seen in my reading vlogs because I've read 2 of the 4. Other 2 ones are books that I've already mentioned. So anyway, I thought I would do this video after all just because it's nice to show you these new books and let you know I've got them, and also to talk about the books I'm currently reading since it is my fall break and I'm having the best time diving into different kinds of stories and not necessarily the stories that I told about in my autumn fall break TBR video. That TBR didn't last long after all. So basically, let's start this video with the haul. First of all, the book I'm grabbing is this beauty. This is the 3rd book in the series by Carrie Maniscalco, and this one is called Escaping from Houdini. You might remember that I have recently been reading the first 2 books in the series, Stalking Jack the Ripper as well as Hunting Prince Dracula. They are a fun young adult horror series which is not that horrible. They are more about the character development and the myth behind these characters, Jack the Ripper and Dracula. And then obviously in this new one, which was just recently released, we get to hear about Houdini. So I'm very curious to read this book. I think that this one comes with pictures as well, but I won't look inside just because I don't want to spoil myself. I like to read these books without knowing what is coming, and I feel like these pictures could spoil the story a little bit, but those photos from history from back in the days are so good to underline the story and make them more historically accurate. This is definitely a fun series I would recommend. Next I have one of those books I've already read, and that is the 3rd book in the Tana French series. This is Faithful Place. It's the series about the Dublin murder squad, and I really like this series. So far I've now read 3 of the books out of 6 I believe there are in total, and I'm definitely planning on continuing on because this one was just to my liking as well. In this one we follow Frank, and that's all I'm going to say because if you haven't read the series you don't know who Frank is, but I love Frank dearly and it was a pleasure to read about him in this book, which I dare say is actually my favorite in the series so far. Then we have another young adult fantasy series. I don't know what's happening to me, but sometimes it's fun to dive into a fast-paced story and just a book that is very different from what you normally read. So I decided to also pick up the 3rd book in this series. This is Catwoman Soul Stealer by Sarah J Maas. It's the 3rd book in this DC Icons series that I've been reading, or actually I've only read the 1st book so far, which is about Wonder Woman, and I really liked it. So I am planning on reading Batman pretty soon or whenever I feel like it, and then I can get started on the 3rd book, which was just recently released. Basically this series takes some icons from comic stories, and for each book it's a different young adult author who interprets that character and creates his or her own story in a modern setting. So a lot of fun as well, and I'm definitely looking forward to continuing on with this series. And the last book in my haul is also the biggest one, and that is Lethal White by Robert Galbraith, which is the 4th book in the series about Command Strike. And as you probably know, this is actually J.K. Rowling who writes under a pseudonym. So actually, all the books I've bought for myself recently have been part of a series, so I think that's a good thing that I stick to the books and the stories I've already started instead of buying too many new books for myself, which, as you know, I've tried to not do too much. And let's see where this goes and how long it will last. But so far, this is a book I knew I had to get as soon as it came out. I've already read it, so you will hear more about my thoughts and feelings on it in my October reading vlog, which will be up by the end of the month. But definitely a huge novel, which is great for if there is a thief coming into your house and you need to bump him in the head. Let's move on to the 3 books I'm currently reading. Actually, let's start with the one I've already shown you. This book, which is still the first book in a trilogy, which takes place in Hungary, and it's a classic. I love it so much. I think it's a really well-written story, and I'm still about halfway through it. I think that since I last spoke to you about it in my previous video, I was 300 pages into it, and now I've only read 1 more chapter since then. But that's because I've been reading so many other interesting books in between, so this one has been put a bit on a hold. But it's not because I don't like it, I definitely do. It's just that it's a book that I own, and I do have some other books that I had to read now before having to get rid of them again. I will explain to you later. My book haul also contains the 3rd book in this series, which I have ordered but have yet to receive. I will put a picture of it up here. The covers are absolutely gorgeous. I'm also reading a very petite classic by one of my favorite authors of all time, and that is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This is a reread for me. I read this one about 10 years ago when I was at university. The reason why I'm rereading it now is because after this fall break, I will be reading this book with some students of mine, and I thought it would be nice to have it fresh in mind and to have reread it. So this one was a thing that had to happen this week, and that's why I had put the other book on hold for a little bit. But I'm already almost done with this one. It's about 100 pages long, and I'm now on page 87, so not too much left to go. I will say that, John Steinbeck, I love him to pieces, but this book is not one of my favorites of his because I feel like it's too thin. The story and the characters are really great, but the storyline is a bit too vague and too thin for my taste. I need more words from him when it comes to the setting and the mood and everything. I also recently watched the movie, which I actually prefer when it comes to this book. But that's because the movie just depicts the characters so well. The book does as well. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically I feel a tiny little bit disappointed with this story. So yeah, it's a really great plot and storyline. It definitely is, and some of the best characters you will ever meet, and your heart will break. But I'm just finding myself a little bit, just a tiny little bit disappointed with this reading experience, unfortunately. And then last but not least, I'm reading a library book, which I got yesterday, no, today it was. And the book is by Bill Bryson. I was interested to read his A Walk in the Woods, but they didn't have that one at the library. So instead I went for this one, which is the Danish cover for In a Sunburned Continent. I think that's what it's called, I'm pretty sure. Or In a Sunburned Country, something like that. Basically, this is a book, a non-fiction book, that is about Australia, and it's about Bill Bryson, who goes there to explore the country that is kind of forgotten because it's so far away, but there are so many interesting things to discover in Australia. And so far I'm only a chapter in, but I get the feeling that he is a humoristic writer who likes to observe and who likes to give us his funny account on what is happening around him. So definitely a book I'm looking forward to reading more in later today. And that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you are having a splendid October month as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until my next video, happy reading!